Hi guys, I'm Eric Hansen. Welcome to Brain and Body Health podcast. Today we're talking to the great, the knowledgeable, the all-powerful Dr. Scott Wustenberg. Today was a lot of fun. We're talking a lot about different neurotransmitters, what happens when your body doesn't produce enough of them, and what you can do to up your neurotransmitter levels. But the impact that like low dopamine or low serotonin, that the ones most people know about, can be huge on your body. But we also start to talk about like the overlap between like low serotonin and chronic pain syndromes and balance issues. And look, it's a lot of fun. We have a nice little rant at the start of the day. So last podcast we talked a lot about mold, and funnily enough, over the weekend, Queensland got just dumped upon, and Scotty's now freaking out that his garage is filling up with black mold, the thing that we spent an hour talking about last time. So if you haven't heard that one, go back, have a listen, because that one was a good one too. But otherwise, guys, enjoy as always. If you've got any questions, feel free to email in at eric@brainandbodyhealth.com.au, and I'll endeavour to read it and get around to it. All right, guys, enjoy. Actually, this is good. Are you recording? Let's hit record.
Yep, I'm on.
Ah, nice. Okay, yeah, so go on. Your house flooded, and you've now got all of the juicy little bits of mold growing that we talked about last week.
That's exactly what's occurring. So on the backside wall in what's arguably my garage, there is mold growing up the wall from where the water was sitting. So we had maybe 2 or 3 inches of water in the bottom of my house from horrendous rainstorms coming through on the weekend. And, we battled it for 48 hours with, pumps, 2 wet-dry vacuums, the kids, everyone kind of getting in there. And we would have moved, hundreds of litres of water out of the house. Now, the problem is that as much as it gets tipped out, the water just kept coming and coming and coming because it kept raining. And the problem, therefore, is that it sits underneath the plates of the framing, and then it starts to kind of grow in what is a delightfully humid environment. Now, Queensland's marvellous at the moment. It's like 35 degrees and about 1,000,000% humidity. I think Dante kind of didn't quite get the depths of hell right. He's just...
I think to put my weekend in perspective, I was quite stressed as well, because we had a fair dumping down in Sydney this last weekend, and I was looking around for my raincoat, and I was looking, I finally found it. So I can totally relate with your story, man. That was.
Thank you. I feel a lot better about the fact that other people were suffering. So we blew through every towel in the house, and then all my work towels as well. The dryer blew itself, so I've had to buy a new one to replace that because it just decided not to cope with everything. My 65-inch television got soaked and fell over and has shattered the screen.
Oh, buddy. 65. Oh, that hurts.
Oh, in the grand scheme of things, I'm really not worried by that. I'm worried much more about the mold. Well, and,
that's a great little segue into talking about neurotransmitters and all that sort of thing. So with the stress load that you've recently been under, how's your brain functioning, buddy?
I don't know. I mean, as I said to you, we'll see how I do today. I actually feel pretty good overall. I've been dosing myself. I had my dose of OptiBrain up before actually coming on the show this morning, making sure that I'm as focused as I possibly can be. As I said, I'm not sure, but generally speaking, I actually think I've coped marvellously well with the whole thing. I only lost my cool once in the grand scheme of this whole adventure, when my kids weren't actually paying me attention to the fact that the house is going underwater. You actually have to do what I want you to do. And so there's been a whole bunch of learning lessons, because a lot of one of my daughter's stuff got damaged in the flood itself, because she didn't get it up off the floor when I told her to. I didn't hear you.
Functioning in a crisis. Yep. No, you selective hearing.
Yeah.
I'm getting that all the time with Sterling, cheeky little bugger.
It gets better.
Yeah, I'd imagine. Well, he's 4-year-old, so there's only so much back talk he can give me at the moment. But I can see where it's headed. But let's so is with the brain up and brain down. So run me through. So we've got the brain down essentially is mainly your inhibitory neurotransmitters, and then
fundamentally
is your excitatory. Basically.
That's exactly how we've designed things. So they are functional foods. So I designed them as powders so they can be drunk. And I designed them so that you can actually titrate the dose because everyone's need is going to be slightly different. So Opti Down is basically designed to help create a state of more calm, to decrease anxiety, and to promote serotonergic to melatonergic function so that people actually get a deeper state of sleep.
I was going to say that the few of my insomnia patients that I've put onto Brain Down have noticed a huge change with their sleeping patterns. Upsettingly to the point where it's, okay, take the Brain Down and you probably don't need to come in and see me anymore because it superseded all of my therapies. So thanks, mate. Ethically, it's great for the patient, but
awesome.
It's making it, it's like, oh, damn it, there's not that many visits in this patient anymore. I fixed it already.
Oh, good. Well, I mean, from my point of view, that's really awesome to hear. I'd say, however, that equally as much is because the visits actually drive the vehicle effectively. Because again, making a neurotransmitter is one thing, but as in the talk I'm giving this weekend, if you don't actually have the neural stimulation and the enhancement of those pathways, you're just kind of sticking stuff on the floor and hoping that something happens. So you still need both. While it's designed to actually do these things, like promoting GABA production or promoting serotonergic or melatonergic production, it works much, much better in conjunction with the actual appropriate stimuluses to actually bring someone's brain into balance again. So don't sell yourself too short at that particular moment in time.
But it's very much you're facilitating the process of production of neurotransmitter as opposed to, hey, here's some melatonin, just take that.
Yeah, that's exactly it. So it's really designed around the idea of allowing you to restore those natural pathways. Because again, with what's in it, things like activated B6, glycine, these are all nutrients that have a variety of uses in the human body anyway. And so oftentimes people get either malnourished or because of absorption issues, they're just not taking it in properly, their diet might not have it, or because of stress over a long period of time, they're actually chewing through their resources so quickly that they can't actually kind of keep up with their needs. And what we're trying to do is actually fill in some of those blank spots while also using some of the herbs such as kava and the magnolia to actually kind of just stimulate them down a particular pathway. Now, obviously, if you know the formula, it's got some theanine in there, which acts on the GABA receptor to actually promote a calming anti-anxiolytic activation. It's non-addictive, so it's not like Valium at that particular point.
So that's an activating GABA receptors as opposed to upregulating your body's ability to produce GABA.
Correct. So theanine itself has been shown to actually bind to it like Valium or benzodiazepines do, but not as strong, and it doesn't cause the same duration of activation. So it's got about a 4-hour half-life in the body.
This is going to embarrass me a little bit, especially if some of our neuromates are listening in. Where's the main GABA production site in the body or the brain?
In the brain, oh gosh, it's really a very global situation. Like the whole brain actually has some degree of GABAergic effect at that moment in time. But yeah, don't get too bent out of shape about not knowing exactly where it is, because I don't remember either.
Oh, okay, that makes me better.
Yeah.
Let's take a step back for your patients that may be listening to this. So like signs of like low GABA versus low serotonin versus low dopamine, because GABA is more sort of agitated, serotonin you aren't feeling overwhelmed. Do you want to run through some of the symptoms one may feel with low various?
So all of them will have a change in the affect of the actual patient itself. And so in a low GABA, the ability to inhibit, the ability to kind of keep calm in any situation are really quite clear. They tend to be much more anxious and frenetic and not necessarily know why they're actually in that particular state, but they're not necessarily unhappy. And generally, low serotonin's got a whole bunch of different features. One of them can be really, really significant neuropathic pain syndromes because of serotonin's effect not just on mood, but on things like decreasing the periaqueductal gray, the body's ability to turn off the descending and ascending pain pathways is significantly lowered. So you might be still quite mood stable, but you've got this really painful low back that you just can't do anything with. And so some of your patients might actually have these chronic low back pains where you know that there's nothing really structurally wrong with them whatsoever, but it's actually that inability to get enough serotonin to that specific part of the brain or the nervous system that's actually showing up the serotonin loss. They can have a really flat affect as well.
Because serotonin's quite prevalent in like spinal cord level pain inhibition as well as, it's not just brain, that's the whole way through.
No, it's right the way through. So the periaqueductal gray goes right the way through the actual spinal cord.
I was thinking, Yep.
Yeah, so the raphe nuclei in the brainstem itself are massively interlinked with that, and the serotonin is also significantly involved with the ability to actually control eye movement and actually hold eyes in a fixated pattern. So patients might have aberrant serotonin if they're getting nystagmuses or saccadic movement, poor control sort of things, driving some degrees of balance of vestibular disorder.
That's interesting. I hadn't thought about the link between serotonin and balance issues. Because, what we know with concussion and TBI and so on, and the effects that can have on brainstem production of dopamine and serotonin. That's purely correct me if I'm wrong, but the molecular size of all of these neurotransmitters is too large to cross the blood-brain barrier, so you need to produce it in the body separately from in the brain?
That's exactly it. The only one that will definitely cross is glycine.
One of those fun... Sorry, I'm going to bump in rudely. Isn't that one of those fun tests that... Datiz Karazian came up with? You take a GABA supplement, and if you get a calming effect, it means you've got a hole in your blood-brain barrier, because if there is holes in your blood-brain barrier, GABA will cross through.
That's a very fair call. However, again, there are still receptors in other parts of the body that do actually use second-order neurons to upregulate into the brain that way. So it's not 100%, but my favourite way of determining that one is that if you take kind of some large peptides, such as casein, for instance, or you do the urinary leaky gut pathways. And take things that really shouldn't be getting into the body, and you find it in the person's pee, then absolutely the gut is leaking. And if the gut's leaking, the likelihood of their brain barrier leaking, because they're all tight junction connections, and if one's damaged, the other one is likely to be damaged as well.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, okay. So so that was a urine test to check for casein and so on.
Yeah, so urinary peptide test, it's highly involved in the autism research, and there's this wonderful man by the name of Carl Reichelt from Finland. He works out of Helsinki University Medical Hospital, and he's absolutely been involved at the forefront of actually determining the effects of these large chunks of protein that are undigested in your gut actually getting into the bloodstream and led the charge against the people who don't believe there's such a thing as leaky gut syndrome. And his basic statement is, well, look, if I can find this in your pee, you're leaking. Yeah. End of story. You just go away.
And is that a specialty lab that would run that test for you, or can you go to your average old GP and say, hey, test my pee?
No, it's fairly specialised stuff at this particular point in time. Even though this work's been kind of going on, and he's been researching it in the university labs for about 25 years, there's still only a couple of places that are doing it. I think there's a lab in Newcastle attached to the university that's definitely looking at these things, and several other places in the world, but it's not very common. However, again, we could do looking for like kilos or things like that coming out in your pee. If you're seeing that, again, it's far too big to have got there by itself. So if it's there, you're definitely leaking.
So I hadn't heard of any sort of definitive other than a symptomatic process of saying, hey, you've got leaky gut or you don't have leaky gut.
Yeah, no, there definitely is.
But back to my other train of thought. So yeah, with what we know with the effects concussions and TBIs and so on can have on your dopamine, serotonin production post concussion. That all gets scrambled. I would imagine seeing is serotonin produced throughout the spinal cord? I'm just wondering if you injure your spinal cord or injure your spine, if there's a localized issue with serotonin production at that site, or is it circulated a different way?
No. The main sites seem to be in the mesencephalon, and they actually have these ascending pathways that go up into the hemispheres, and then also being transmitted down through the periaqueductal grey. But there's also peripheral tissue production of serotonin, and most of the body's actual serotonin production is actually in the gut. And so, it's only about 70-80%, I think, actually is manufactured well away from the central nervous system. So the main area that seems to suffer the most intrinsic damage to dysregulate serotonin and dopamine is really at the top part of the brainstem. And I think that's largely to do with the kind of talking, whipping, translational effect that occurs when the head starts bouncing around. So you have basically the head moving in one plane of motion, the brain moving in another plane of motion, and the body is usually rotating underneath the whole thing. So it's effectively three different motions that all kind of pinpoint at the brain stem and the top of the spinal cord, and they basically just kind of scrunch up and twist like a tea towel, and you get a Chinese burn effect on those nerves. And now that damage, of course, will then affect those up translating pathways going into the hemispheres. Now,
I saw a really cool SPECT scan. What's the name of the scan that they're doing these days, where you can see all of the different pathways and their level of metabolic activity and where they run in different colours? Is that
I think it's a SPECT scan.
It's a SPECT scan. But the SPECT scan of the brainstem in someone post-concussion, and it was sort of, here's healthy and here's post-concussion, and half of it was just shut down. But there was almost like a spiral activation pattern left in the brainstem post, and it was like, oh Jesus, that stuff is scary.
That's exactly the stuff that I'm curious and interested in, because the question mark is, are those pathways repairable? And then that kind of brings into, what are you going to do to actually repair them? And they're fundamentally going to be kind of damaged in the same sort of way as a transneuronal degeneration. And what actually drives those things into states of repair is high doses of things like B12, activated folate, activated B6, and a lot of the nutrients that we're actually going to find in both things like OptiUp and OptiDown, and several of other products like the B complexes, etc. But there's a window of about 24 months that you can actually drive the body back into a healing state. And one of the things you have to do is you have to start down-regulating biopterin. Now, biopterin actually is part of all the methylation cycles, but when it starts to kind of rise up too much and it's not being used properly for whichever reason, it starts driving neuropathic pain pathways. And so you get this big upregulation. Now, I also suspect that because of the damage to coordination and the lack of movement that people do, or dysregulated movement post the injury, the actual dysfunction through those cerebellar peduncles going into the brainstem is also a factor involved, because as you lose grey matter in the cerebellum, you actually get an upregulation of this biopterin and a whole lot more pain as well.
Yeah, that's a good one.
So, I mean, this is
come across that.
This is my reading at this moment. So biopterin is actually improved in a variety of different ways, but the major one that we can actually help with is movement. So rehab exercises will help it. Generalized movement, such as, say, Tai Chi, things that are obviously going to be slow and not too horribly impactful to them, but actually getting them moving, that it's going to start to drive nitric oxide production and nitric oxide synthase use, actually competitively inhibits the biopterin production and use.
Is that interesting? Because I think they've... I read a paper a couple of months back about the new protocols for head injury, and it's essentially, before they used to say you need to stay awake, you need to stay awake, you need to stay awake after a head injury to see if there's hematoma and all that sort of thing, whereas these days they're now showing that no, you really should be sleeping. Let's let them go to sleep if they want to go to sleep, because the sleep helps clean all of that up. And then the days of, you've got a concussion, you need to rest, total rest for 2 weeks. And now they're going, well, that's just stupid. You need to get up and move as much as you possibly can to help reintegrate all of those vestibular reflexes ASAP.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely the case. I mean, we've just done so many weird and wonderful things to people over long periods of time that I'm kind of pleased that we're actually starting to make some differences in that particular arena.
And so we've had a good chat about signs of sort of low GABA and low serotonin. You want to hit the other big gun, dopamine? Low dopamine for your listeners?
Sure. So dopamine, of course, is highly involved in what's called the seeking system. And the seeking system is bound into all of our primary behaviors. So you could be seeking food, you could be seeking to avoid conflict, you could be seeking to avoid danger, you could be seeking a mate. It's tied up into everything. So when we have low dopamine systems, we tend to have low motivation. We have kind of a flattening of effect that you're not unhappy, you're just not really interested in anything. There's not much joy, there's not much excitement, and so people tend to like to self-medicate to actually give themselves spikes of that, and that's where some of the abuse of alcohol or some drugs like ecstasy or cocaine come in. Now, people with these low dopamine pathways will also tend to have quite low energy, and they tend to burn out quite quickly. Like, they'll go out and do something. I don't want to go back and do that again. I'm just not interested. There's not enough passion as a tendency in these people. And I think that's a really interesting one to be looking for. Interest, motivation as the big things. Will you keep doing things? Do you have the drive to actually keep practicing, doing music lessons or otherwise, things that you used to really enjoy doing, you just slowly kind of move away from doing, and the drive to seek actually starts to become lost.
And I know, certainly in the past when I've had chats to you about how to appropriately use Opti-Down, Opti-Up, you're advocating that you shouldn't really use Opti-Up in isolation of Opti-Down.
That's my preference. It really depends on the patient. Some people tend to really require significantly more up than down, just because of how their brains focus and concentration. Because part of what Opti-Up was designed for was really to focus on the ADHD, ADD, autistic spectrum disorder kind of section of the population, amongst other things. And what we're really trying to do is give them stimulus down those particular pathways to actually increase the ability to attend, to bring their focus onto something and try and decrease the hypervigilance that often comes with the disturbances of ADHD. And so if you kind of think about how things like Ritalin works in that situation, what we're doing is putting in a methamphetamine to stimulate the dopaminergic pathways that allows the person to bring their focus onto a singular moment. It's not that they've got attention deficit, it's that they're attending to everything far too much. And so where I was trying to go was do something kind of a bit more natural without any side effects to actually try and mimic a similar thing.
So I'd imagine then that would also have an impact for your Tourette's, so like tremors, tics, style patient cases with the basal ganglia starting to run amok.
Yeah, not that I've knowingly had anyone with Tourette's using it, but that's absolutely the case. We've also utilised it in Parkinsonian disorder patients and decreased some of the tremoring. The problem with those sorts of patients is that they tend to become acclimatized and habituate to a dose, and the dose tends to keep going up because it's just nowhere near as strong as a pharmaceutical drug, and it's not intended to be. We're trying to stimulate these pathways a lot more gently while also doing, focused rehab exercises, eye movement exercises, retraining in whichever form the practitioner is wanting to do to actually strengthen the pathway to make it a much more permanent occurrence.
And to that point, so when we're utilising, so if there is a sort of a habituation to dose with OptiDown and OptiUp, but also taking into account the fact that we're sort of upregulating your body's sort of natural ability to produce these neurotransmitters. So if sort of rehab is successful, OptiDown, OptiUp does what it does, and then I start to back away from OptiDown and OptiUp, my body then sort of maintains that higher level of neurotransmitter production on its own, and then we're stepping in with OptiDown, OptiUp as a crisis. It's a busy week. I've been a bit stressed lately. Jump back on OptiDown, OptiUp, and then I'm feeling better. Let's start to back off it rather than just making it a staple of your everyday life.
That's exactly it. That's how it was designed. Some people just perform lots better with it perpetually in there. But with things like OptiDown, one of the ideas is if you start to habituate to dose, do it like 3 days on, 1 day off, or 5 days on, 2 days off, so that you're not actually becoming horribly reliant on the actual product at that moment in time.
One thing I thought was fascinating when we were first sort of working on all of my dramas, and you told me, or you were talking to me about the process of that sort of catecholamine steal, where people in that high stress state, where you're driving cortisol, and then you end up with using your adrenaline pathways to maintain your circadian rhythms and so on, and your body diverts resources away from dopamine, serotonin towards that. That's huge. Run through that for me, because I love hearing you talk about that.
Oh, okay. So that's exactly what occurs, as you said. When someone's in an absolute crisis state, the brain has to make determinations as to what's essential. Now, ultimately, survival is always the most essential thing that the organism's trying to do. And from a basic perspective, cortisol is going to sharpen focus and concentration and push your blood sugar up. But it's really only designed to be there for short periods of time. So when the crisis doesn't go away, you have to keep pushing that particular barrow, because as soon as you stop having cortisol in the system and your blood sugar starts to drop, there's a potential ultimately, if it goes too low, to actually cause what we'd consider a diabetic coma, and you actually pass out, and then only horribly bad things can occur. So the pathways for things like, say, your sex hormones, testosterone down to estrogen and adrenaline, are all iron-dependent and B6-dependent pathways. So cortisol itself is also a B6 zinc iron-dependent pathway, and the brain therefore has to start diverting resources and making decisions as to which way do we actually want to go. Do we have to keep your blood sugar up to keep you running, or do we give you kind of great decision-making and mood and motivation? Because to some degree, with the seeking system already wired in, if you're seeking a defense and running away, once it's going, you're hardwired into it anyway. But the system, again, once it's going hard enough for long enough, will start to actually break all the other loops that keep normal cognitive function going and actually drive down into the survival loops of adrenaline and cortisol and just keep pushing you until everything's chewed up. You'll eat your muscle, you'll then eat your body fat, and then, of course, you die.
Let's my brain's going. Let's make you as efficient as possible at being really, really stressed.
Correct. And basically you shut down the gut, so we start getting poorer digestion and we get more inappropriate vagal tone, and this stops the ability to close up your tight junctions, so you get more leaking, your immune system becomes dysregulated, and then you get more inflammatory response or allergenic response, and then your skin starts breaking down, and it's all this massive stress wind-up. And this is kind of where part of those ideas come down to. Even though we might need to be supporting your up pathways of dopamine, adrenaline, noradrenaline, this is where we might put you through the opti-down or opti-calm first, so that we actually start taking the edge off and actually get you away from the anxiety response as part of that hardwired panic fear system that you're running, and actually inhibit you so that we can kind of give you a bit more breathing space. Because as soon as you stick those uppers in, if you're already hardwired to keep running a stress response, we might be actually feeding into that system.
That was going to be my next question. How do you sort of feed dopamine and serotonin if someone's hardwired for cortisol
So you do it carefully, basically, and generally speaking, what we'd do is we'd put some inhibitors in place at that moment in time. And so you could use something like my Optiversal with the glycine glutamine to actually do some inhibition. The glycine actually acts as a neuromuscular and neurological inhibitor, and the glutamine that's in it, contrary to lots of the popular opinion out there, actually helps the nervous system recycle glutamate or glutamic acid into its original form and stops the excitatory neurotoxic effect. So, everyone says, you've got to be careful with glutamine because it could turn, it's total poppycock. It just doesn't work that way in a normal situation in the body. Now, as I point out, excessive glutamic acid or things like MSG can be excitatory, neurotoxic, and will send your cells into a TND cycle and cause problems. But that's the point of having the glutamine there, to actually help recycle it and spit out the ammonia, and we get rid of it through the glial systems and the lymphatic systems. What you'd do is you'd actually put some inhibitors in place and gentle the system down, and then start on really low doses of the up or some B vitamins, and then just start slowly bringing the levels up and wait and watch and start assessing for how the effect actually changes.
Because I was wondering about that. So with certainly knowing with treating like anxiety or the stress, people are hardwired for that fear wind-up systems.
Sure.
And then we're looking at the therapeutic effects of hyperbaric oxygen, and that's we're essentially flooding your brain with oxygen so it can fire a lot better. But your brain's hardwired for stress, and so here you go, here's some oxygen, go run into that wall as fast as you possibly can.
I'm pleased to say that hyperbaric oxygen doesn't seem to be quite so negative like that, because it's operating on squeezing oxygen into the plasma to upregulate the amount in your whole body. It's going to actually allow the system to do what it's doing anyway, but without creating quite so much lactic acid or oxidative stress. So really what hyperbaric oxygen is going to do is help shift some of the negative impacts of the carbon dioxide to oxygen breathing cycle, because it doesn't rely on the respiratory system. So we're not actually using hyperbaric to breathe in the oxygen, which in a stress state, the fast, rapid breathing kind of burns off all the carbon dioxide and shifts the oxygen into an acidic state, creating more adrenaline release. Hyperbaric works by just squeezing it straight through your skin into the plasma. And because of that, there's no negative impact or consequence on that acidity at that moment in time. You're also going to be lying there for an hour. And because you're actually forced to still yourself for an hour, it actually has a real positive impact of winding down some of that hyperactivity in the first place. Now, that will depend, of course, on what you do in there. But I had a patient on Saturday morning who just literally within a minute while he was going up to pressure was asleep and spent the whole hour that way.
Perfect patient.
Yeah, it was awesome. So the research doesn't really support that it actually drives potentiation of a negative situation anyway. And I've certainly not observed it.
That's interesting because I did see a few things onto that function neuro message board about possible disadvantages of oxygen, but that makes a lot more sense.
I mean, everyone's going to have opinions and thoughts. None of the literature that I've seen actually runs that way. And a lot of the original work where I came across this was in the autistic field, where they were using hyperbaric with B12 injections to actually try and drive down systemic inflammation. Now, this combined with a whole bunch of other therapies was producing some pretty phenomenal results and allowing those kids to actually alter their cognitive ability. Now, again, I'm not saying hyperbaric heals autism or anything silly like that, but what it's shown to do, certainly with that B12 scenario, is allow the system to actually operate in a more positive state and drive down a whole bunch of systemic inflammation. Now, inflammation attacking a nerve is never going to be a good thing. And anything that helps inhibit that oxidative stress on nerves is always going to be a good thing. Now, if you put the person into kind of a state where there's a gap in the inflammatory oxidative stress cycle, the hard wiring of the brain that's programmed to open them up and help them grow has got to have a better opportunity to move them forward. And that's really what I like about it. You know, that works on anything.
With the, I just thought of something. So with sort of the inflammatory and detox style of things, because I read that with your sort of normal healthy sleep cycle patterning, it's the, actually, you know what, maybe I didn't read it. Maybe it was you that told me this.
Okay.
That, or maybe not, we'll find out. But between the hours of sort of like 10 p.m. to 12 p.m. is when your brain does its peak detoxification, or your body does its peak, and then from then on it's more restorative. So if you want to get your body detoxed, you need to be falling asleep pre-midnight. Is that...
That's certainly what I was taught when I went through the sleep study seminars a few years back. And ideally what they were saying is that every half hour that you're sleeping before midnight's worth about 2 hours of sleep to the brain in the early hours of the morning. So you have to work a lot harder sleeping for longer post-midnight to actually kind of make that sort of effect occur. Now, in fairness to it though, human beings habituate, and so shift workers can habituate their sleep cycles to a different phase. So circadian rhythm really comes down into it. However, that said, the human being circadian rhythm works best with a lot of kind of bright sunlight, blue light hitting the eyes and the optic chiasm and the pineal gland, and then sitting up into the pituitary to start your cycles, and having light through the day compared to living kind of an artificial light cycle. It just doesn't do quite the same thing according to everything I keep looking at.
Are there any tips or tricks that you've come across to help with the sort of normalization of sleep cycles and trying to get people who are, like jet lag, for instance, and going from one sleep pattern to another sleep pattern, or like your shift workers? There's quite a lot of different things that are shown to help with these things. The first thing is to actually have a reasonably cool room. So to sleep in itself, you really want to be as much in a cave as you possibly can. I think that's quite novel. So you want a really dark room. You want a room that's about 23 degrees or so. You don't want it too warm whatsoever, as you can't offload heat particularly effectively. And inflammation by itself actually drives people to stay awake. So if you can't deload heat from the brain, because sleep kind of appears to be actually as much
much as anything a heat detox for the hard drive. So imagine yourself as a computer. The computer itself could be water cooled, or it's got a great big fan and it's sucking all the heat from the computations that the computer's doing. Well, that's exactly what sleep does for you. Otherwise, you'd have a brain kind of a bit more like an elephant or a whale. They don't require the same sort of sleep, but they've got these massive heads to hold a massive brain to do the same sort of computational action that you can do with yours.
Oh, so yeah, I hadn't come across that before.
Yeah, that's the weird things you watch on kids' television when they're telling you interesting facts. But that's kind of how it's meant to work. So the first thing is keep the room dark and cool. You want to decrease anything that drives inflammation. And this is where some patients actually report that they've taken something like a Nurofen or Advil before bed, Voltaren before bed, and they sleep really well. And they kind of will come in and say that that's because of the pain. And actually what it is because of inflammation and the stimulus that comes up from some of those peripheral systems. So the body's got nerves that if there's inflammation or threat occurring to them in the middle of the night, it'll snap them out of their sleep pretty damn quickly. And so if you're inhibiting those things, it's going to actually help keep you in a deeper state of sleep for longer. Obviously, as I was talking about, we want to get you as much quality bright light first thing in the morning, and we want light right across the circadian rhythm of the day. So we want to get you out into sunlight in the middle of the day and out into sunlight somewhere at about 4 p.m. in the afternoon, so that your brain can actually trigger the whole light cycle going across the day. And where we're definitely seeing a lot more problem, especially say in wintertime, is where you've got your workers getting up, it's in the dark, say Melbourne, for instance, you're up in the dark in the middle of winter, you're at work at 7 a.m, it's still dark, you're already kind of in the building, you're working in the building all day and you never saw the light, the sun goes down and you're basically on your way home and you realistically never saw any external light apart from your fluorescent bulbs the entire day. That's absolutely common for decreasing your ability to make serotonin, leading on to melatonin and screwing up your sleep cycles, and it causes seasonal affective disorder.
Certainly noticed that anyone that has got sort of poor sleep hygiene, throwing on that blue light filter app on any tablet or phone device makes a fairly quick impact.
Yeah, that's definitely the right thing. I use a product called F.Lux, F.Lux, and I've used it for years with both myself and my patients, and it takes the blue light out. I also put pink or red sunglasses on people who are having to operate with their computers or devices in the later part of the afternoon or evening, so as to actually soak and filter out the light hitting the eye itself. The other things that we try and make sure of is the amount of actual ultraviolet light to stimulate the vitamin D receptor and vitamin D production, because of course without enough vitamin D in the system you can't regulate serotonin, melatonin and dopamine production, which have this vitamin D receptor TAC and FOC appear to be the genes that have polymorphisms, that if you have that particular polymorphism, you're going to have problems actually regulating the serotonin dopamine balance, and you stay up and alert and far too jittery, and you can't get yourself down to sleep particularly well. Sometimes we use adenosine. Adenosine is an amino acid, and it tastes really horribly bitter because you have to suck it to get it in. But adenosine has several interesting positive effects, one of which it's a neuroprotective antioxidant soak, so it gets rid of a whole lot of oxidative stress, and they've found some really positive results in its use immediately post-stroke, that the experimental use of it found that patients suffering stroke, having it almost immediately and continuing to utilize it, suffered significantly less oxidative stress in the brain and less damage thereafter, and faster rehab. But in of itself, adenosine is part of the ATP or energy cycle, adenosine triphosphate. So as you burn through energy through the day, your adenosine monophosphate is meant to build up. And therefore, if we give you adenosine or adenosine monophosphate in this instance, what we're actually doing is artificially inducing the amount of singular adenosine to actually throw the cellular switch to shut you off so that you produce more while you go to sleep at night. So you start taking that from about 4 o'clock in the afternoon onwards to actually help wind the person down.
That's interesting. From the sort of neuroprotective and oxidative mop-up of adenosine, because I know I was talking to you very briefly, a couple of weeks back about one of the things that is being talked about with the FNOR style approach to rehab, the functional neuro-orthopedic rehab from David George and Stuart Fife and Brad Charles is running it, is the concept of neurogenic inflammation in sort of peripheral cutaneous nerves.
Sure.
So we're looking at sort of sensitization and inflammation build up in sort of peripheral nerves from musculoskeletal trauma to the area, creating I really need to get on top of the precise biochem mechanism, but
it creates allodynia.
Yeah, very much so. Very much. And what I've been finding with the sort of focused on this neurogenic inflammation therapy is so there's a cream that FNOR has developed called Prologel, which has got bicarb amongst a few other things in there as active ingredients. But it's certainly very potent pain relief. So if someone does actually have that neurogenic inflammation, it makes a very quick change to, and particularly with that chronic pain that people get with sort of the neurological and neuropathic style pain. But I was wondering then if we added adenosine to the mix, whether that would speed up recovery and rehab from that style of an approach. What are your thoughts on that?
Absolutely. There's absolutely no reason, especially if it's in a proper neurogenic loop. I think that's going to work a lot more if it's oxidatively stress involved and ongoing at that particular moment in time in a chronic loop. I don't know where the absolute effect, whether that's in a central situation or whether it's going to be activating, mainly because I've never looked or had that particular question asked, because I tend to use it a lot more for central nervous system dysfunction rather than peripheral nervous system dysfunction. But I see absolutely no reason, because one of its effect is going to be systemic production of ATP, and therefore helping the mitochondria all over the place, including all those peripheral neurons, actually get their life back together.
Yeah, interesting. Well, I might do a bit more research and then see if it pans out. I'll let you know if it worked or not.
Yeah, the hardship is, as I said, is that it tastes particularly awful, and it's really best sucked as against tried to be absorbed through the gut.
It's not one of those funny ones where a patient comes and goes, look, I'm dying, I need something, and like, okay, this is the thing that you need to be taking, and like, is there a smaller tablet? It doesn't taste very, like, do I really need to take? Are you kidding? Like, this is the thing that's going to fix all of your things, and you're giving me grief about its blood. Oh, Jesus.
Yeah, absolutely. That's absolutely what I get. I get a lot of stuff about that because, of course, Opti Up and Down are absolutely natural. There's no artificial flavors or colors or anything in it. And so, of course, the Opti Up has got theobromine from cacao in it. And, of course, it's got a slightly chocolate flavor because of this. So that's kind of what it's not too bad. People say, I don't really like it. It's a bit bitter. And it's like, okay.
It's a bit, don't care. Take it. Talk to me when your brain's better.
It's actually really hard to make a functional food product with absolutely no excipients that actually tastes magic for every possible variant that you're going to have of these sorts of things and still actually remain an appropriate, ethical, effective product. So it's not that I want to kind of hate on anyone's complaint. I'm absolutely understanding you. Just take it anyway. I know if you have to, hold your nose.
Totally understand. Take it anyway. Empathetic. Sure, that sounds horrible. Take it anyway.
But I've got a really cool graphic one of my patients gave me actually on Saturday, and she sent me 2 pictures from her sleep recording. So she's got a personal monitoring device that actually looks at her sleep, and she sent me a recording of one day with Opti-Down and the quality of the sleep, and one day without it and the lack of quality of the sleep and the dysregulation of the sleep cycle. So I found that a really nice...
That's brilliant.
Yeah.
Some of those Fitbits do that now.
Yeah.
I think I'm going to get one. Final question, and then I'll let you go, mate. I always have this debate with people who tell me that they're vegetarian.
Right.
And it's well, because that, the argument then becomes, how are you getting the long chain amino acids into your brain so that you can produce dopamine? Because you can't get it from plant-based sources, which is my understanding. Or there's like one super berry made from the middle of South Africa somewhere that if you eat in stupid quantities will cross, but otherwise, so is my maths accurate? If you're a vegetarian, how do you make dopamine in your brain if you're not eating meat?
So, well, I mean, you could just kind of have Coke Zero, to be honest.
Just dig a hole in your blood-brain barrier.
No. If you think about it, dopamine is made from tyrosine, okay? And so the phenylalanine is the precursor to making tyrosine, and of course in the artificially sweetened drinks there's bucket loads of the stuff. So I mean, you could just take it in that way.
Maybe that's a thing. Drink Coke Zero. Give yourself a blood sugar dysregulation issue. Give yourself a chemically induced concussion, and then come in and talk to me. And the first thing was, hey,
no.
Eat some meat.
Yeah, let's not. So none of the people listening, please. I'm not being serious about taking artificially sweetened drinks. So let me be absolutely clear before someone actually thinks I'm being serious.
Could you imagine if someone just saying, "Oh, that's brilliant," hit stop right there, and then, you know what? Thanks.
Yeah, total disclaimer, I did not mean that. That was total fallacy and farce. Now, in real essence, there's a big difference between, say, a vegetarian diet, and there's multiple variants of a vegetarian diet that do have things like, egg going in. Now, egg is a whole protein. It's going to have basically all the amino acids that we're actually requiring at that moment in time. Some of them might eat a bit of cheese, and again, in the protein, even if they can't fully digest it, they will be getting some of those proteins. The vegan diet's a little bit more interesting. It can absolutely work for people, but it takes a lot more effort in food combining. I'm not personally a huge supporter of the absolute basic vegan diet. I know it can be made to work, but you have to work a whole lot harder. And realistically, I'm not convinced that the vegan diet in itself is actually a true diet that hasn't actually been created with the effects of industrialization and our current civilization being able to kind of give you a supplement of B12 or give you an iron supplement or give you a protein supplement. In general terms, I don't consider it particularly compatible with life, and people kind of raise up certain very small populations around the world and say, but what about these people? I say, well, yeah, what about those people? What are they eating? And you know, there's not a lot, but everyone kind of brings out interesting studies that says, well, the China study shows that people's, transitioning from not eating meat to eating meat is the thing that's causing all these problems, and they're cherry picking their data and not saying, well, the vast amounts more pollution nowadays, or xenoestrogens in the diet, or you could pick almost anything that's showing that there's an alteration in people's health. Prior to 1990, I think it was, Japan had no. It was illegal to sell women any form of contraceptive medication, and they had phenomenally low levels of cancer and breast cancer. And since then, their rates of all these things are starting to catch up as women have been able to do exactly the same awful things as women in the Western world have been doing to themselves for the last kind of 45 years. So from going back to the point again, you can absolutely get your amino acids from a vegetarian or vegan diet. You just have to work really, really, really hard because you've got to get food combining going from different food sources, such as you'll have certain of the amino acids coming from, say, soybean, and some from kidney beans, and some from like whole brown rice, and some from, and so you just have to spend most of your time actually trying to work out what you're getting from where and stay extremely vigilant. And this is the problem that most of the young, emotionally activated vegans coming in tend to be requiring kind of support, let's say, to remediate themselves because they, eat comfort food, chips and bread and toast and pancakes and not actually a lot of vegetables, and they really don't work very hard. Now, again, people out there might want to lynch me for that, but these are the people that I have coming in who actually need help and support and get remediated. Some of them probably out there living absolutely brilliantly, doing it absolutely right, but they spend probably a lot more time having worked out what foods from what sources. At the same point, I will raise that a lot of those legumes have a lot of phytates in it and lectins in it, and that can cause a whole lot of stress on the digestive system and actually bind up a lot of mineral cofactors and stop you absorbing those ones. So again, there's got to be some balance going in a whole lot of different spots. From my particular point of view,
it can work. It just takes a whole lot of effort to figure out exactly what you need and how.
Correct. And, some people just don't have literally the smarts nor the patience and perseverance to actually keep going through and doing it properly, which is really the big issue. But, if you get like a hemp seed protein supplement or activated brown rice supplement, you're going to get a whole protein formulation that should actually help try and keep you in balance, and you get some B12 shots and take some B complex and swallow down some iron, you'll probably be fine. I just, for all people who are on some degrees of interesting diet variant, my suggestion is you should be looking at get some testing done, get your blood levels looked at and read, make sure that your levels are actually staying in kind of the upper half to 2/3 of the range, because in most instances, if you're getting down below a half, you're probably actually starting to malnourish. And lots of people, when they're not actually having enough protein going in, I get a lot of people who say, but when I eat that meat, I just feel bad. I feel so much better when I don't eat it. And they're coming in with all sorts of problems. But the issue actually started because they didn't have enough stomach acid and enzymes to digest the food in the first place. So, of course, because you couldn't digest it, the actual food sat in their gut and made them feel rancid. And I appreciate that. But you don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. You look at, why is it happening? Why can't you digest it? What can we do to support that? Well, what's an enzyme made of? An enzyme's made of protein. So if you don't have enough protein going into your system, how are you going to make the enzyme to digest the heavy, hard to break down slab of meat that you're trying to kind of chew through? So you have to stimulate the acid, which requires kind of zinc and B6 and B1 in the first place. And then you've got to get enough, bile salts and a whole bunch of other things, including digestive enzymes, all there at the same time. And stress people with poor eating patterns and low protein levels in their system are probably not great candidates to chew on a slab of rump steak. So, you've got to start with something that they can actually work with and then modify them and start going, well, look, these are the benefits of doing these things this way. Start having more soup, start having more stew, maybe a protein supplement to actually help them.
Mate, that's the best answer I've heard yet.
Awesome.
Mate, we're coming up to almost an hour. I think I've chewed your ear off long enough.
That was fun.
Mate, that's been a lot of fun. Hey, next time I thought I wanted to talk a bit about the difference between sort of the Australian wheat, like the genetically modified stuff, versus what's in Europe, and so that whole gluten thingy.
Oh, that's always fun.
Yeah, it's a rant. All right, mate.
Awesome.
I'm going to hit pause. All right, thanks for talking.
No trouble. See you, bye.
God Damn, we ran through a lot today. I just re-listened to it and we talked about more than I thought. Guys, I hope you enjoyed it. You learned a lot. If you've got any questions, feel free to email me in, eric@brainandbodyhealth.com.au. Again, I'm in Sydney and Brisbane. Sydney in Gladesville. Scotty's in Brisbane. I'm in Gladesville. If you want to get in touch with me, either email or give us a buzz on 9817-6611 with the error code 02. Otherwise, Scotty can be found at 0733710222, and he operates out of Toowong in Queensland. Yeah, guys, actually, he's not in Brizzy at all. What am I talking about? Yeah, guys, I hope you enjoyed. Stay tuned for the next one. We're probably going to talk a lot about pain and a few other bits and pieces, which should be.
Thank you for watching. To learn more from Dr. Scott, visit our site at optihuman.com.au.